Chapter 1. The Raging Waters. The relentless rain had been falling for days, transforming the usually peaceful French Broad River into a menacing force of nature. Dark clouds loomed overhead as Ryan Matthews stood at the river's edge with his brother Connor, their clothes already soaked through from the persistent downpour. The thunderous roar of the swollen river filled the air, drowning out almost every other sound in the vicinity. Ryan pulled his jacket tighter around himself, his eyes scanning the turbulent waters. The river had already claimed several trees and pieces of debris, carrying them downstream like matchsticks in its furious current. But something caught his attention, something different from the usual flood debris. At first, it appeared to be just another log being swept away, but then he noticed movement that seemed deliberate, purposeful. "Connor, look!" Ryan pointed toward the churning waters. "There's something out there." As they focused their attention on the spot Ryan had indicated, their hearts sank. Through the sheets of rain, they could make out the unmistakable form of a German shepherd struggling against the merciless current. The dog's head barely stayed above water as it fought against exhaustion, its movements becoming increasingly desperate. A small crowd had gathered along the riverbank, their faces masked with helpless concern. Some had their phones out, recording the scene, while others shouted suggestions that were lost in the roar of the water. But no one moved to help. The current was too strong, the risk too great. Ryan felt something twist inside his chest as he watched the dog's struggles becoming weaker. Without a word to Connor, he began removing his jacket. His brother's eyes widened as he realized what Ryan was planning. "Ryan, don't! The current's too strong." Connor grabbed his arm, trying to hold him back. "We need to call emergency services." But Ryan knew there wasn't time. The dog's movements were becoming more erratic, its strength clearly failing. In that moment, all of Ryan's rational thoughts were overwhelmed by a single powerful impulse. He couldn't stand by and watch this animal lose its battle with the river. Shrugging off his brother's restraining hand, Ryan scrambled down the muddy embankment. The icy water hit him like a physical blow as he plunged into the river, momentarily stealing his breath. The current immediately tried to sweep his feet out from under him, but he fought to maintain his footing on the slippery riverbed. The dog was about 15 feet from the shore now, being carried downstream at an alarming rate. Ryan pushed against the current, his muscles screaming in protest as he fought his way through the churning water. The cold was numbing, making every movement a supreme effort of will. As he got closer, he could see the dog more clearly. It was severely undernourished, its fur matted and tangled. Despite its exhaustion, there was something striking about its bearing, even in these desperate circumstances. Its eyes met Ryan's, and in that moment, he saw something that surprised him. Not panic or fear, but a keen intelligence. With one final surge of effort, Ryan managed to reach the struggling animal. The dog didn't resist as he wrapped one arm around its chest, but instead seemed to understand immediately what was happening. Together, they began the grueling journey back to shore, fighting against the current that threatened to sweep them both away. By the time they reached the riverbank, Connor and several others were there to help pull them out. The dog collapsed on the ground, its whole body trembling from cold and exhaustion. But even in its weakened state, Ryan noticed something unusual about its behavior. Instead of the frantic energy one might expect from a rescued animal, this dog maintained an almost eerie composure, its eyes constantly scanning its surroundings as if assessing potential threats. As Connor helped Ryan to his feet, they got their first good look at their new companion. Despite its bedraggled condition, the German Shepherd's breeding was evident in its noble bearing and intelligent face. But there was something else, something that made Ryan's pulse quicken. On the dog's ear, barely visible through the matted fur, was a small tattoo, a series of numbers that seemed to hint at a story far more complex than a simple case of an animal caught in a flood. And Chapter 2, Silent Guardian. If this story has caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. The drive home was tense, filled with the sound of rain drumming against the car roof and the labored breathing of their unexpected passenger. Ryan sat in the back seat with the German Shepherd, who remained unnaturally still despite his ordeal. Connor kept glancing in the rearview mirror, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "We should call him Max," Ryan said suddenly, breaking the silence. The dog's ears twitched at the sound of the name, but otherwise he remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the passing scenery outside the window. There was something almost military about his posture, even in his weakened state. At home, they quickly set up a warm space near the heater, laying down blankets and placing a bowl of warm water within reach. Max accepted their care with a dignified patience that seemed at odds with his desperate situation from earlier. As Ryan gently dried his fur, he noticed more details that made his heart race with questions. Beneath the matted fur were old scars, some forming distinct patterns that suggested they weren't from random injuries. The tattoo on his ear, now clearly visible, displayed a series of numbers and letters that appeared to be some kind of identification code, K97249ST. It wasn't like any regular pet registration number Ryan had ever seen, but it was Max's behavior that truly set him apart. He didn't bark, not once. Most rescued dogs would show signs of distress or excitement, but Max maintained an almost supernatural composure. His eyes constantly scanned the room, taking in every detail, every movement, every potential exit. When Connor accidentally dropped a plate in the kitchen, Max's reaction was telling. Instead of startling or barking, he immediately pressed himself against the wall, making himself as inconspicuous as possible before resuming his vigilant observation. Over the next few days, Ryan began to notice more peculiarities. Max responded to subtle hand gestures that Ryan made unconsciously, as if they were commands he'd been trained to recognize. During their first walk around the neighborhood, a car backfired, and Max instantly moved into a protective stance in front of Ryan, his body tense and alert. It wasn't the reaction of a pet, it was the response of a trained guardian. One morning, while playing in the backyard, Ryan picked up a stick and, without thinking, made a casual throwing motion. Max's response was immediate and precise. Instead of chasing the stick like a normal dog would, he dropped into a perfect tactical position, his eyes focused and waiting for what seemed to be a specific command. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't typical dog training. This was something else entirely. The mystery deepened when Ryan tried to take Max to the local vet for a checkup. As they approached the clinic, Max's behavior changed dramatically. His muscles tensed, and he planted his feet firmly on the ground, refusing to move forward. His eyes darted between the building's security cameras with an awareness that seemed almost human. After several attempts, Ryan had to give up and take him home. That evening, as Ryan sat on the porch with Max by his side, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Across the street, partially hidden behind a parked car, stood a man in a black jacket. He was watching them intently, his presence somehow both casual and threatening. When Ryan stood up to get a better look, the man melted away into the growing darkness, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of unease. Later that night, as Ryan lay in bed unable to sleep, he could hear Max pacing downstairs, his movements precise and methodical, like a sentry on duty. The sound should have been unsettling, but somehow it made Ryan feel safer. Whatever Max's story was, wherever he had come from, he had chosen to stay with them, and his presence felt like a shield against the unknown dangers that seemed to be gathering around them. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Past. The morning started like any other, with Ryan and Max taking their usual route through the neighborhood. The early autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet as they walked, But something felt different today. Max's posture was more rigid than usual, his ears constantly twitching at sounds Ryan couldn't hear. They were passing the local coffee shop when Ryan noticed it again, the man in the black jacket. He was sitting at an outdoor table, pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes followed their every movement. This time, Ryan decided to face the situation head-on. He changed direction, heading straight for the coffee shop. The man quickly folded his newspaper, left some money on the table, and disappeared around the corner before Ryan could reach him. Back home, Connor was waiting with an odd expression on his face. He was holding his laptop, and the look in his eyes told Ryan that something significant had happened. "You need to see this," Connor said, turning the screen toward Ryan. The local news website was open to an article about a specialized canine training facility that had experienced a security breach several months ago. The facility, run by a private security contractor, specialized in training dogs for high-risk operations. Ryan's heart began to race as he read further. The article mentioned that several highly trained dogs had disappeared during the incident, and while most had been recovered, one remained missing, a German Shepherd with exceptional abilities. The description matched Max perfectly, right down to the distinctive tattoo pattern. As if sensing that he was the subject of their discussion, Max padded into the room. His behavior had changed subtly since they'd discovered him in the river. He seemed more relaxed in their presence, occasionally even showing signs of playfulness. But there were moments when his training would surface, like now, as he systematically checked each window before settling into his favorite spot by the fireplace. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, causing Max to instantly shift into alert mode. His posture became rigid, but he remained absolutely silent, a response that still unnerved Ryan. Through the peephole, Ryan could see a man in a suit, holding what appeared to be official identification. The man's demeanor was professional, but something about him set off warning bells in Ryan's mind. "Good morning," the man said when Ryan opened the door slightly, keeping the security chain in place. "I'm conducting a survey about lost pets in the area. Have you seen any strays recently? Perhaps a German Shepherd?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp, scanning what he could see of the interior. Ryan felt his pulse quicken, but kept his voice steady. "No, sorry, haven't seen any strays around here." Behind him, Max had positioned himself in the hallway, completely out of sight, but ready to move at a moment's notice. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, and he handed Ryan a business card that looked official, but somehow felt wrong. After the man left, Ryan examined the card more closely. The company name, Global Security Solutions, seemed generic, and the phone number led to a disconnected line when he tried calling it. Connor did some quick research online, but found no trace of the company's existence. That evening, as Ryan was reviewing security camera footage Connor had installed after their recent concerns, he noticed something strange. In the grainy images from 3 days ago, the man in the black jacket could be seen walking past their house at precisely 3 a.m., stopping briefly to examine their mailbox. But what caught Ryan's attention was Max's behavior at that exact moment, recorded by their indoor camera. He had silently moved to each window in sequence, following the man's movement without making a sound, before positioning himself near the front door until sunrise. The pieces were starting to come together, but they painted a picture that made Ryan increasingly uneasy. Max wasn't just a trained dog, he was something more, something that certain people seemed desperate to reclaim. As Ryan watched Max now, calmly lying by the fireplace, but still somehow alert, he realized that they had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple rescue. A gust of wind rattled the windows, making the flames in the fireplace dance. Max's ears twitched, but he remained still, his eyes reflecting the flickering light. In that moment, Ryan made a decision. Whatever Max's past held, whatever secrets lay behind those intelligent eyes, they would face it together. He had saved Max from the river, but in many ways, Max had been protecting them ever since. Our Chapter 4, Hidden Truths. The autumn wind howled outside as Connor hunched over his laptop, his face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. For the past few hours, he'd been diving deep into research about specialized canine training facilities. Ryan sat nearby, absently scratching behind Max's ears while watching his brother work. "Look at this," Connor said suddenly, turning the screen. "Remember that tattoo on Max's ear? K97249ST? I think I figured out what it means." He pulled up several documents he'd managed to find. The K9 part is obvious, but the ST might stand for Special Tactics. There are references to a classified program that trained dogs for complex operations. These weren't just regular service dogs. They were elite animals, trained for specialized missions. Ryan looked down at Max, who seemed to be listening intently to their conversation. The dog's intelligence had always seemed extraordinary, but now they were beginning to understand just how special he truly was. As if to demonstrate, Max suddenly stood up, his posture alert. Seconds later, they heard a car pulling up outside, before the engine sound was even noticeable to human ears. Connor quickly accessed the security cameras he'd installed. A black SUV with tinted windows had parked across the street. Two men emerged, including the one who had previously claimed to be conducting a pet survey. This time, their demeanor was different, more purposeful, more threatening. "They're not even trying to hide anymore," Ryan muttered, watching as the men studied their house. Max moved silently to the window, keeping himself hidden while observing the situation. His training was evident in every calculated movement. Suddenly, Connor gasped. "Ryan, you need to see this." He had managed to access an archived news article that had been taken down from the internet. It detailed a controversial government contractor called Advanced Canine Systems, which had been developing a program to create what they called super dogs, canines, with enhanced cognitive abilities and specialized training for complex operations. The program had been shut down after ethical concerns were raised, but rumor had it that some of the dogs had been acquired by private military contractors. The article included a photograph that made Ryan's blood run cold, a row of German shepherds, each bearing the same style of tattoo as Max, being trained in what looked like an advanced facility. A sharp knock at the door interrupted their discovery. Through the security camera feed, they could see the two men standing on their porch. Max's reaction was immediate but controlled. He positioned himself in the hallway, hidden from view but ready to act. His training was surfacing again, but this time it felt protective rather than threatening. "Mr. Matthews," one of the men called out, "we need to speak with you about a matter of national security." The way he emphasized those last words sent a chill down Ryan's spine. These weren't people who would simply go away if ignored. Connor quickly began copying files to a USB drive while deleting his browser history. "Whatever Max was part of," he whispered, "these people are willing to go to extreme lengths to keep it quiet. We need to be careful." The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Max remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the door, waiting. In that moment, Ryan realized that their time of simply hiding was coming to an end. Whatever Max's true purpose had been, whatever he had been trained for, it was all about to come to light. Through the security camera, they watched as one of the men spoke into a radio, and in the distance, they could see more vehicles approaching. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across their front yard, and Ryan knew they were running out of options. They needed to make a decision, fast. Looking at Max, Ryan saw not just a highly trained military asset, but a loyal companion who had chosen to protect them. The dog's eyes met his, filled with intelligence and trust. Whatever secrets lay in Max's past, whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. But first, they needed a plan. As if reading their thoughts, Max moved silently to the back door, his behavior suggesting he knew exactly what needed to be done. Years of specialized training had prepared him for situations exactly like this. Now, it was time to put that training to use. Not for the purposes his original handlers had intended, but to protect the family he had chosen. In Chapter 5, The Choice. The back door opened silently as Ryan, Connor, and Max slipped into the growing darkness of the evening. Max led the way, moving with practiced precision through the shadows of their backyard. His training was evident in every silent step, every calculated pause, as he guided them away from the house. Behind them, they could hear the front door being pounded more forcefully. "Mr. Matthews, this is your final warning." The voice carried an edge of authority that made Ryan's heart race. Through the trees, they could see flashlight beams beginning to sweep across their property. Connor clutched his laptop bag containing all their research about advanced canine systems and the mysterious program that had created Max. "We need to get somewhere safe," he whispered. "Somewhere we can expose what they've been doing." Max suddenly froze, his posture alert but controlled. Seconds later, they heard footsteps approaching from their left. The dog's training kicked in instantaneously. He guided them behind a large oak tree just as a beam of light swept past their previous position. Ryan held his breath, amazed at Max's ability to anticipate danger before it became visible. They made their way through the wooded area behind their house, Max choosing a path that kept them hidden from the searching teams. His specialized training was now working to protect them, using all the skills he had been taught, but for a very different purpose than his creators had intended. As they reached the edge of the woods, they saw more black SUVs arriving at the main road. The situation was escalating quickly. Max led them to a small stream, following its course to mask their trail. Ryan couldn't help but marvel at the dog's tactical intelligence. This wasn't just training, this was profound problem-solving ability. Suddenly, Max stopped again. This time, his ears perked forward and his muscles tensed. Before Ryan could react, a figure stepped out from behind a tree ahead of them. It was the man in the black jacket, the one who'd been watching them for days. "That's far enough," the man said quietly, holding up a small device that looked like a remote control. Max's posture changed instantly, his body becoming rigid as if fighting against an invisible force. The man pressed a button and Max whimpered softly, the first sound they had ever heard him make. "You don't understand what you've stumbled into," the man continued, his voice eerily calm. "K97249ST is government property. He's part of a program that's vital to national security. He's not just a dog, he's a breakthrough in animal intelligence enhancement, worth millions in research and development." Ryan looked at Max, seeing the internal struggle playing out in the dog's eyes. The remote control seemed to be triggering something in his training, some deeply embedded command that was fighting against his newfound loyalty. "He's not property," Ryan said firmly, taking a step forward. "He's a living being who made his own choice. Whatever you did to him, whatever you trained him for, he's chosen a different path now." The man's expression hardened. "He doesn't make choices, he follows programming. Watch." He pressed another button on the device. Max took a shaky step toward the man, his movements jerky and unnatural, fighting against himself. But then, something extraordinary happened. Max stopped. His eyes met Ryan's, and in them was a clarity that transcended mere training. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged forward, not at Ryan but at the man holding the remote. The device clattered to the ground, and Max stood between the man and his new family, his choice made clear. The man's composure cracked for the first time. "Impossible," he whispered. "The conditioning can't be broken." "The programming is hardwired." Connor stepped forward, holding up his laptop. "Maybe it's time the world learned about your programming and what you've been doing to these animals. I have everything, the documents, the protocols, the ethical violations. One click and it all goes public." The standoff stretched for what felt like an eternity. Max stood firm, his presence a shield between the man and his chosen family. In his eyes was something the program had never intended to create. Not just intelligence, but true consciousness, true choice. Chapter 6. A New Beginning. Morning light filtered through the trees as the standoff reached its breaking point. The man from Advanced K9 Systems stood frozen, his carefully constructed world of control and conditioning crumbling before his eyes. Max remained positioned between him and his chosen family, his stance unwavering. "You don't want this getting out," Connor said firmly, his finger hovering over his laptop. "Everything's here. The illegal experiments, the enhanced cognitive programs, the ethical violations. One press, and every major news outlet gets it." The man's facade finally cracked completely. "You don't understand. We were creating something revolutionary. These weren't just trained animals, they were the next step in evolution. Enhanced intelligence, advanced problem-solving abilities, unprecedented tactical capabilities. And you never stop to consider that with real intelligence comes real choice," Ryan interrupted. "Max isn't just following programming anymore. He's chosen his own path." As if to emphasize the point, Max relaxed his defensive posture slightly, though his eyes remained fixed on the man. His transformation was complete, from a programmed military asset to a conscious being capable of making his own decisions. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the tension. More black SUVs were arriving, their headlights cutting through the morning mist, but something was different this time. These vehicles weren't marked with the Advanced K9 Systems logo. They bore federal government insignias. "We've been watching ACS for months," a new voice announced. A woman in a dark suit emerged from one of the vehicles flanked by federal agents. "We've suspected ethical violations, but we needed proof." She turned to Connor. "Your data dump last night gave us everything we needed. The program is shut down, effective immediately." The man from ACS seemed to deflate, his authority evaporating in the morning light. As agents moved to take him into custody, he looked at Max one last time. "We created something greater than we intended," he said quietly. "We thought we were programming soldiers, but we ended up awakening souls." In the days that followed, the story broke nationwide. Connor's evidence exposed the full scope of the Advanced K9 Systems program. The enhanced dogs were all located and evaluated, but none showed the level of independence and conscious choice that Max had developed. The French Broad River continued its eternal flow, but it held different memories now. Standing on its banks a week later, Ryan watched as Max approached the water's edge. This time there was no fear, no hesitation. The dog stepped confidently into the shallow water, then looked back at Ryan with what could only be described as contentment. "You know," Connor said, joining them by the riverside, "the federal agent said we could keep him. Officially, he's been classified as a unique case, a successful evolution beyond their original programming." Max trotted back to them, shaking water from his fur. His transformation was remarkable. The rigid programmed behaviors had melted away, replaced by a natural blend of his enhanced intelligence and genuine emotions. He still maintained his protective instincts, but now they came from choice rather than conditioning. The tattoo on his ear remained, but it had become something different. Not a mark of ownership, but a reminder of how far he had come. His journey from a programmed military asset to a conscious, choosing being was more than just a transformation. It was a testament to the power of genuine connection over artificial conditioning. As the sun began to set, Ryan, Connor, and Max headed home. Their lives had changed forever since that stormy day by the river, but the change had brought something beautiful. They had started out trying to save a dog from drowning, but in the end, they had helped free a soul and gained a family member in the process. Max walked between them, no longer the silent, rigid military asset, but a living example of how true intelligence, whether human or canine, cannot be contained by programming alone. His choice to break his conditioning wasn't just an act of rebellion, it was an expression of the most fundamental aspect of consciousness, the ability to choose love over programming, family over duty, and freedom over control. End of story. Dear viewers, we hope Max's journey from a programmed military asset to a conscious choosing being has touched your hearts. This tale of breaking free from control and choosing one's own path reminds us that true intelligence, whether human or canine, cannot be contained by programming alone. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We bring you unique stories that explore the depths of consciousness, choice, and connection every day. Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us about similar stories of remarkable bonds between humans and animals. For more captivating tales, check out our special playlist by clicking the link to your left. Don't miss our next story. Click the notification bell to stay updated. Your support helps us continue sharing these extraordinary narratives of hope, transformation, and the unbreakable spirit of love.